Hey, good morning, guys. Just want to make this review real quick before I start working out. It's about 6 in the morning, and just waiting for this pre-workout to kick in. Oh, almost lost the camera. And my ears are starting to tingle, so I can tell it's starting to kick in. So I want to get this review knocked out. And if you haven't noticed already, if you're not nauseous, I'm putting my phone on my Hornady press to give it a little more stability so it's not shaking like crazy. So let me know how that turns out. But what I want to talk about today is the Burris PEPR mount versus the American Defense Recon. The whole reason I have these two is I originally got the Burris PEPR, but for those of you who are watching my videos, or I guess who are not, my Bushnell scope took a spill. Have some damage to it. I'm going to send that back and check out and see how good the Bushnell warranty service is, or their customer service is. In the meantime, I was able to pick up the Primary Arms 1x6 scope, which I have a review on. It was in stock for a hot second, and I was lucky enough to pick it up. On their site, when I bought that scope, I was given the choice to pick up a discounted scope mount. The Recon was one of them, and I took advantage of it. I wanted to form my own data point on, comparisons of, different scope mounts. Depending on what you read or who you ask, this PEPR mount is good to high quality, but I've read a lot more things saying the American Defense is definitely high quality. So I wanted to form my own opinion and pass it on to you guys, because that's kind of the whole point of making these videos. Not to just document it, but to pass it on, and hopefully my info can help some people out. So what I want to say is, real quick, in case this video is like 10 minutes or whatever, and nobody wants to watch all 10 minutes on just scope mounts. In my opinion, I think the American Defense Recon is a higher quality scope. It feels it in the hand, and I think the interaction with the levers and then onto the gun is just more quality of a feel than the Burris PEPR. And I'll get into why I feel that way. So let's just start out with, this cost me $100. I think normally this is about $180. However, with the discount on the Primary Arms site, I was able to pick it up for $140. So that helps the price point a little bit. That's just a data point. I'll let you guys decide if they're worth it to you. But now getting into the actual mounts. First thing I noticed, or the first thing I wanted to know, because my gun setup is not for bench shooting. That's not what I want to do primarily with my setup, so weight does matter to me. And just by looking at them, you guys can probably tell that the PEPR mount is actually heavier than the Recon. I'm not sure by how much, but you guys can easily look that up. But it's noticeably heavier. The PEPR is noticeably heavier than the Recon. With that being said, has a little bit more mass. If you look at the rail contact, or the points of the scope that would actually contact and hold the mount onto the rail, and I'm sorry if I say scope and mount interchangeably, I mean scope mount. It's just I haven't been able to shake that, I don't know why. But anyway, if you look at the points of this mount that contact the rail, compared to the American Defense, the Recon contacts the rail a heck of a lot more than the PEPR, which I feel would lead to a better re-zeroing capability, a more consistent mounting, and I think that would lead to better re-zeroing when taking the scope on and off once it's mounted in the mount. The reason that's important to me, it's important, I'm sure it's important to most people. The reason it's important to me is I want to learn how to get good with iron sights and this scope. So normally when I go to the range, I'll shoot with the scope on for a while, take this off, and then shoot with some irons. And obviously re-zeroing is important, because I don't think anybody wants to continually re-zero the rifle. So due to that info, I do think the Recon would re-zero better. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have any hard evidence on that. It's just, in theory, I would think the Recon would re-zero better. What else can we get into? The screws that hold these things together. The Burris has 12 screws, and they're Torx screws. The 12 is a little bit of a pain in the butt when you initially start it, but how often are you switching out scopes within this mount? So it's kind of a one-time inconvenience. My complaint is that they are Torx screws, and the finish is already seems to be wearing on it, or coming off, which makes me think, how good of quality are these screws? How good a quality is the finish? Will they strip? That's my main concern. Oh boy, almost lost it. Yeah, it's not focusing. Sorry, guys. Probably because I have that in the way. There you go. But you can kind of see, the finish coming off the screws. And my main concern is worry about stripping them. The way the Torx design is, there's more thin metal on the inside of these screws than with the American Defense Recon, which is just Allen screws. I just think these are less prone to stripping. The tool that they give is very precise. So, in my opinion, I just like the whole Torx. I like the... oops, sorry guys. Kind of killed my train of thought, but I'm going to push through it. I like the idea of the Allen head screws better. They just seem a little more sturdy. Now, is that a major problem? No, because you're probably setting it and forgetting it, and it's something that's down the line. But I just think if you're spending this kind of money, you want something that's going to last you as long as possible, right? Let's see. One positive thing about this Burris mount, albeit small in my opinion, these screws, I forget what it's called, but screw into the actual scope mount, so there's nothing left hanging. It's flush, it's clean. They're tapped into the actual mount. On the American Defense Recon, they're left protruding a little bit. Is this a big deal? I don't think so. I don't think you're going to run into any problems with this. I just feel like for that kind of money, it should be a cleaner look. And who knows? It might be once I mount a scope in here. It might expand the size of these rings, and you might not have as much protruding. But I just feel for, and also if you were to shorten the screws, maybe it's not as good of a design, it's less versatile, I don't know. But it's just one talking point, not a big deal. Let's talk about design a little bit. One thing I noticed here, if you can tell, the Recon is longer. And it pushes the scope out a little bit more in front of the PEPR. I do not think this is a big deal. I'm just going over this because it's a difference. The main thing here, which I think, is the distance between the rings are farther on the Recon than the Burris. And I think that's the most important thing about the scope mount. Well, not about the entire scope mount, but of this comparison, this individual comparison here, is because these rings are farther apart, I think it's going to give you more versatility for how you can mount the scope. If you want to mount it a little farther up, a little farther behind, because basically you're putting those scope turrets in the middle here, and you have more room to push it forward or back in this design. Both of them throw the scope out far enough where I have this mount right in front of my backup irons, and they both, put my head in a good position. So that's fine. But I just think this is the Recon is a better design because you have more room in between those scope rings. Let's see. That's about it. The Burris has Picatinny rails on the top of the scope mount. To me, that doesn't matter. I would never use those. If I'm mounting a secondary optic, I'm going to put it to the 45. Recon puts the scope more forward. I already just talked about that. I think, it's hard to tell on here, but I think the PEPR actually mounts the scope a millimeter or two higher. I didn't actually measure, but just by looking at it from the base, it just looks a tad higher. Maybe, like I said, maybe a millimeter or two. Don't know if that's important, just talking point. If anything, when I did have scopes in these, I'm pretty sure the American Defense Recon is absolute co-witness with the front sight. So, let's see. I think that's about it, guys. Yeah, right on 10 minutes. So, in conclusion, I feel the American Defense is a higher quality scope. Or a scope mount. I feel like it's a better scope mount. Less weight, more rail contact, better quality locking levers. And I did this video a couple times. I'm not sure if I showed you the actual action of them. So with the pepper, you pull this out and then you lift up. You pull this, and I'll show you down here. You pull this out and then you lift up. And one of the reasons why I think that this is a little more quality is the resistance on these are different. Not a big deal, and they work fine. But this is easy, and this has resistance. Once again, not a big deal, but why do they feel different? I think that kind of lends itself to the quality control, or just a lesser quality build on this. These you push in, which I think is a little bit better of a design anyway, and you flip up. You push in and you flip up, and these both feel the exact same, and it just lends itself to feel higher quality. So for that reason, if you're not talking about price, because that's for you guys to decide, what you can afford and what you want to spend on, this is a better scope mount. I would definitely recommend this one. In my opinion, if I know this now and I had to pay $180 for this and $100 for that, I don't know which one I'd choose, because that's almost double. And on a AR build, you can put $80 to something else. However, optics are pretty damn important, because if you're not hitting, you're not having fun. So, I guess, for me, I guess I would redo it. I would spend the extra money, buy the Recon, I think. But, that part, I can give you guys some info. That part's for you guys to decide. I'm just trying to get focus. We'll do a little bit more of macro shots. These screws are how you adjust the tension on this mount, for how tight it clamps onto the rail. And you can just see it's an overall slimmer profile design. Alright, so that's the one I would pick. I'll roll in the Burris PEPR, just for, a little scope mount pouring on that one. And then I'll be done. I gotta work out, guys. Need to get to work this morning, but now I'm done with this review. I'm happy. And I could finally mount my friggin' primary arm scope on my rifle. These are how you adjust the tension and the difference on the other one, or on this Burris. You unlock it, then lift that up. Pretty cool design too. Like I said, guys, this by no means is a bad scope. I would just choose the Recon over it if I had a choice. And the biggest negative is this has, the biggest negative I have hard info on is this weighs more. Other than that, I have no proof that this does a lesser job than the Recon. It's just, what I got in a feel for. So, that's that, guys. Thanks for watching. Definitely have a couple more ready to roll out. That's why I wanted to get this video done. I've been trying to make this for 2 or 3 days, and it was hard for me to get started. I just get caught up all the time. So, finally just busted out in the morning. And I'm going to go and work out. I hope you guys have a great day, and take care.